Now, after this latest episode of Ahsoka, it seems pretty clear that next week's finale will be one of two things. Either it'll be an extra long, exposition-heavy episode that clears up or wraps up many of the sort of mysteries and plot threads that have been introduced, or, and much more likely, it'll stick to formula and be a rather short, action-oriented finale that leaves us with plenty of questions about, well, pretty much everything. Because to me, though this episode was very enjoyable, it had a lot to like, especially if you enjoy good action. But this felt more along the lines of a sort of mid-season finale, or an episode where everything has finally been laid out, where all the conflicts have been given to us, but not exactly everything or close to it has been explained to us, and where it's going to take a whole back half of a season, or multiple episodes at the very least, to figure it all out and resolve all of it in a satisfying manner, not just one more episode. I mean, right now we don't even have the first clue what Thrawn is even up to, what kind of deal he's made with these Night Sisters, and why they want to bring back this cargo that looks like coffins to the other galaxy, or what that cargo might be inside of them, other than probably being bodies, maybe alive, dead, or in stasis. We don't really know why we should be so afraid of his return either, other than a couple times now the show has told us we should be afraid of his return, that it'll mean bad things for the New Republic. And also because, yeah, a lot of us know the character. We know Thrawn from elsewhere and what he is capable of, or what he was capable of in those books. But if I didn't know that, if I had no idea who this Blue Admiral was, and a lot of viewers out there don't keep that in mind, I'm not so sure I'd understand what's the big deal about one Admiral returning with his limited resources. Especially given he basically lost this first fight, though much like in Rebels, he tells us he lost for a reason that'll pay off later, even though that didn't work out so well for him in that show. But anyway, before I get too far ahead of myself, let's start at the beginning of the episode. And this one kicked off back on Coruscant, always great to see Coruscant, where Hera is facing a Senate committee after disobeying orders, and they are discussing taking away her command. And once again, we see Senator Xiono, who is the father of Kaz from Resistance, that show that nobody watched or remembered. And he's upset at Hera for suggesting that Thrawn is still out there and that he may return, that it's all a cover to go look for Ezra or something. That seems to be what he believes. And he's apparently ignoring the fact that known members of the Imperial Remnant were running a shipyard on Corellia that was creating a super hyperdrives or many super hyperdrives, and that a squadron of New Republic fighters were present or witnessed when a giant ship with 7 of these hyperdrivers managed to jump to presumably another galaxy, following the exact same known hyperspace route of Purrgil that are what took Thrawn to the other galaxy in the first place. But he thinks Hera has zero evidence to back up any of her claims despite all that. Like, why is no one else in this Senate committee speaking up to back up Hera? But anyway, this character, this senator, can of course have his own motivations for not wanting to believe Thrawn could potentially return, or just not wanting to believe Hera for some sort of personal reason, or grudge against her perhaps. And it does seem almost personal with him for some reason. Either way, I'm not trying to say that's an issue with the show per se, that it's unbelievable she'd have an enemy or someone who wants to stick their head in the sand regarding the possible return of Thrawn. As much as I'm saying it'd be nice to have a clue why he was so opposed to all of this, and again, why no one kind of stuck up for Hera in this meeting despite evidence that she is telling the truth. To me, this feels like a kind of lazy way to begin to explain why the New Republic will be so unprepared for Thrawn's inevitable return. In other words, he seems ignorant or stubborn because we need the New Republic to be ignorant and stubborn, and not because he personally has any reason to behave this way. It's not a huge problem I'm having, but the more competent they would make the New Republic out to be, the more impressive Thrawn being triumphant over them could have been. And during all this, we of course have C-3PO come in and speak on behalf of Senator Organa, on behalf of Leia. And yeah, I think it's always good to use him. I think this works better than bringing in perhaps a CGI Leia or something along those lines. I know some will call member berries on all this, but it's fine, I think. I liked it. Again, I think it just works, and at least somebody was sticking up for Hera when really someone should have been given that evidence. We also saw here Admiral Akbar at this meeting, and I think perhaps Nien Nunb. I'm not sure if that was him or just another Sulstan, but I was really hoping for Admiral Akbar to speak up in defense of Hera at some point and ask if perhaps they were falling into a trap of Thrawn's design or something. After all this, we were once again treated to Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker in his early Clone Wars attire. He is in a recorded hologram speaking to Ahsoka about what she should expect during the Clone Wars, all the while present-day Ahsoka practices her forms. And again, this could be called member berries, and no doubt will be by some people, but I think it's fine. I think it works. It's another reminder that Ahsoka has history with Anakin, history fighting in the Clone Wars, and history fighting some pretty formidable enemies back then, which is interesting that she can't defeat Baylan in this, considering who she has beaten, like Maul, for example. Plus, this seems to try and cap off all of this with Ahsoka realizing that, yes, Anakin was a good master, and what he became after doesn't change that fact. Next, then, we get a little banter between Huyang and Ahsoka while in the Purrgil, and I do think Huyang has been a highlight. He has brought the perfect amount and type of humor to the show, and I'm glad that they brought him back from Clone Wars. I like that little connection. This is then followed by them and all the Purrgil coming out of hyperspace in the other galaxy and coming out of it in a giant minefield. The Purrgil then bail on them and they end up hiding in the debris field or the Purrgil graveyard. During this, Thrawn then learns that Ahsoka was the Padawan of Anakin Skywalker and that this will make her unpredictable and quite possibly dangerous. We're then with Sabine and Ezra and the Crab People as they slowly make their way across the plains in their pod homes to a new location. And we learn that Sabine still hasn't told Ezra about how exactly she found him, and there seems to be no desire from Sabine to tell him about that, and that what she has to assume at this point, thinking Ahsoka is dead, which she does, that their one and only chance of somehow ever going home or escaping this galaxy, that being Thrawn's ship, that it's going to be leaving very soon. And do keep in mind, Ezra seems very interested in going home, as you would no doubt expect after being stuck here on this planet in another galaxy for 10 years and missing all his friends, which Sabine did tell him about, though she didn't seem to tell him about Jacen, that Hera and Kanan have a child. At least he didn't mention that when he was kind of recapping what had happened to all of them, that Sabine had told him had happened to all of them. But anyway, all of this is sort of strange to me. I get that Sabine is happy to find Ezra, and she wants to just enjoy this moment with him or this little time with him before she has to tell him the truth. And she is very worried about telling him that truth, that it might anger Ezra just a little bit to learn that what he gave his life for, in a way, what he sacrificed for to bring Thrawn to this other galaxy, to remove him as a threat from the other galaxy, that Sabine may have kind of undid all of that by giving Thrawn a means by which to get home now. But if she doesn't tell Ezra soon, if she doesn't tell him until after Thrawn has gone, I dare say he's going to be even more upset that they'll neither be able to somehow stop Thrawn by sabotaging the ship, somehow, some way, or that their one and only chance to ever get home is now gone. I find it very hard to believe that Sabine thinks everything will end up better if she doesn't speak up now. And I know she's nervous, she's afraid, she doesn't want to ruin this moment for Ezra, but waiting is only going to make it worse. Either way, Sabine does tell Ezra that Ahsoka took her on as an apprentice, which I think rightfully so surprised Ezra quite a bit, and he mentions how she did train a little bit back in the day when he was first learning as well. And though I do question Sabine staying silent, I do wonder what in the hell she's thinking, I will say the chemistry between these two is really, really good. And I know a lot of people were upset about their reunion last week, that they didn't think it was emotional enough or handled very well. But I actually liked the way it was done. I like that they kind of reverted back to sort of joking around with each other or taking jabs or stabs at each other, kind of like they used to. And after not seeing someone for 10 years, that's exactly what I think you would revert back to. Not necessarily something overly emotional, but something comfortable, something familiar. During all this, Ahsoka then tries to reach out to Sabine to try and find her, which is then sort of picked up on by the Night Sisters, who Thrawn has asked for help locating them. And they, Ahsoka and Huyang, are then flushed out of the debris field. This is followed up by, I think, my favorite scene in the whole episode, that being when Baylan and Shin part ways, which I don't think was overly surprising, given how Shin has seemed to be far more interested in just getting power than Baylan, that her ambitions, as he basically said, are leading her elsewhere. And I really kind of like how there were virtually no emotions here, that she only seemed upset that he wasn't going to help her in the fight against Ezra and Sabine. To me, their relationship seems to be somewhere between that of a Jedi master and apprentice, where a sort of lifelong bond is formed, and that of a Sith master and apprentice, where they're both using each other and eventually one will kill the other one. This was, I think, Baylan always having cared about Shin, but realizing he no longer had anything useful to really kind of teach her, and that there was no need or use to take her with him anymore as he sought something entirely different from her. Thought if she got involved, Baylan would too, and Baylan does kind of say something along those lines that he can't let her interfere, and Ahsoka basically acknowledges at the end of the fight that she didn't have to beat him anyway, that again she was just being this sort of distraction, or wanted to take his howler or his wolf creature. And once she did that, once she rode off with that, Baylan seems to contemplate going and helping Shin against Ahsoka, but decides to follow what he instead came here for originally. And I really do think this will be the last we see of Baylan Skoll in this series, even if there were maybe more scenes of him in the next episode or more about what's going on with him. Because, for better or worse, considering the passing of Ray Stevenson, this might just be the best way to sort of end his story, to just have him going off into the unknown after who knows what. I don't know, I just have no clue how you handle him going forward and how big of a part he was going to play in what's to come, or if he was setting up something separate from the main Thrawn storyline. And if that is the case, I suppose you can either let it drop altogether, or you could explore it elsewhere, like in a novel at some point, or you could even try to recast Ray Stevenson. I'm not sure how that works, but you could do that too. Hard to say what the future of the character looks like when you again consider the unfortunate passing of Ray Stevenson. Meanwhile then, while Ahsoka was distracting Baylan, Ezra and Sabine are fighting the Nomads, and we learn that Ezra now only needs to use the Force to fight. He turns down or lets Sabine keep his lightsaber and to use it, doesn't even want to blast her. And though I like the concept of him just using the Force to fight, I thought it was fine. I did think maybe it might be or could look a little cooler, perhaps. There were rumors of Ezra training with some master who taught him some secret Force fighting style, but that doesn't seem to be the case. He seemed to just Force push and use Force freeze a couple times, unless he was holding back against Shin, who clearly got the better of the two, who got the better of Sabine and Ezra. But she certainly didn't get the better of Ahsoka when she finally showed up. Ahsoka pretty much easily defeated Shin and the Night Troopers as well, who do not appear to be undead or anything like that, or maybe infused with Night Sister magic. We didn't see them ooze any green smoke when they were shot and killed, or when they were stabbed with a lightsaber, kind of like what happened with Marok. Either way, in the end, after Thrawn orders what's left of his troopers to retreat, Ahsoka gives Shin the option to surrender, and I'm happy to say she didn't take it. I'm going to be really, really disappointed if Shin is headed for some kind of redemption arc down the road, when she seems very, very interested in power. We don't need every character, or nearly every character, to go good at some point. Some characters just need to die a villain, and then stay dead. Thrawn then tries to blame the defeat on Baylan not joining the fight, and I do think that yes, had Baylan joined in, that changes the outcome. Ahsoka was clearly no match for him, and thus neither would the others have been either. He then tries to spin it as a sort of victory, or that something was at least gained in defeat, which, as I said before, that kind of reminds me of Rebels Thrawn, where he would always have a reason to let the good guys go, that he would claim it served his purposes further. Though that said, he did have the feeling of a smart, intimidating Thrawn at the very least. Again, I still love the voice here, even if I'd argue he could have made some better decisions along the way and gotten the victory if he had, like with just carrying out some sort of aerial attack on Sabine and Ezra when you know exactly where they are. I just don't think it's the smartest idea in the world to send stormtroopers after a Jedi, even if he did think Baylan would be there to help. Though, sure, even though they didn't win that particular fight, they do still have the edge overall. All he really needs to do is get back to the other galaxy with this mysterious Night Sister cargo, which, for whatever reason, is taking a really, really long time to load, even though it looks like there are only some 50 canisters or containers that they're loading onto the Star Destroyer. I mean, again, I'm no Thrawn here, but instead of sending 2 squads of troopers, I send out a few TIE fighters, or bombers if I have them, and I use those stormtroopers to help load the Night Sister cargo onto my Star Destroyer to hasten that process. But anyway, we then get our happy reunion in the end. Sabine and Ahsoka meet back up again after Sabine thought her master was dead, and Ahsoka and Ezra get to hug it out as well. And for the moment, everyone seems good and happy, but we still have a lot of explaining to do, especially to Ezra, who has absolutely no idea what is going on. But we'll have to wait and see how he reacts to all that, because that was how this one ended for now, until we get the final end next week with, as I said at the top, what is either going to be a long, jam-packed episode, or something that potentially leaves much to be desired when it comes to giving us some of the answers we're looking for. And so overall here with this episode, there were things I certainly liked and enjoyed, and things I liked and enjoyed less. I thought for the most part, all the action looked really good visually. I'm pretty happy with the show. It's looked pretty good for Star Wars when, of course, it's not going to have the same budget as a film does, and thus the production values of a film aren't going to be there. Along with that, I've also been enjoying Kevin Kiner's score. It has been very Star Wars-like, and it has fit the show. I also thought Ezra was great in this episode when they were captured by the stormtroopers and he tells them to wait and that they could talk instead. That felt like classic Ezra to me, and I'm happy to say that being around Ezra has brought the Sabine out of Sabine as well, that she is feeling a lot more like herself. And though they've clearly been trying with Ahsoka to make her a little less grim and stoic like she was earlier in the season, now that she's gotten over all that stuff, I do think she's still coming off a bit flat though, for some reason. I know she's obviously older, but there is something energetic missing in Rosario's performance. It's not bad or anything. I think she's doing about as well as anyone could or would do. But there's something that, I don't know, is a little off when it comes to her in live action, after seeing her in so much animation over the years. Thrawn, I think, was decent. Like I said, he felt more like Thrawn, or sounded and just kind of had the presence of Thrawn here. And it was like he knew what was going on, like he was staying steps ahead of everybody, even if it feels like there were better options for him to take. And I think as long as he wins next week, and I fully expect him to get the win, I expect him to make his way home, I think it'll be all good with him in this series at least, and we'll have to see how he's used going forward. Though I again think that Baylan and Shin are or were the best parts of this episode. I almost wish this next episode would just follow Baylan out into the unknown, follow everything with him, that I'm more curious what he's looking for than I am in how the rest of them are going to get home or not get home. But like I was saying, I wouldn't be surprised if we get nothing more from him in this series, unless they've already decided or figured out how to proceed with the character without Ray Stevenson, which I suppose is very possible. They may have a backup plan already. I mean, it's just going to be a shame if they drop all this with Baylan because of what happened. I feel like what's going on with him, what he senses, was the whole reason behind coming to another galaxy in the first place, instead of just making this planet one in the other or original Star Wars galaxy. I really hope they figure out what to do with Baylan, and I really hope this next episode is enjoyable and that somehow it finds a way to at least cap off most of the questions we have right now. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this episode and what you expect to see in the finale. Are you happy with what the show has been thus far and the way it's handled these characters, or has it all left something to be desired? Whatever you think, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.